Have you ever wondered how the Japanese have survived earthquakes, tsunamis, and long, harsh winters without ever running out of food? For centuries, Japanese families have mastered the art of preservation, not with instant noodles or frozen meals, but with ancient, time-tested foods that seem to never expire. From sour red plums buried in salt to fish dried so hard you could hammer a nail with it, these ingredients tell a story of survival, patience, and flavor unlike anything you've seen before. In this video, we'll uncover the 22 unique foods the Japanese stockpile and why they've stood the test of time. Some might even change how you think about food forever. It looks like a shriveled red marble, wrinkled and fierce, but this sour little jewel can outlast an entire lifetime. Why do the Japanese treasure it so deeply? For over 1,000 years, families have salted plums and dried them under the summer sun, turning fresh fruit into something almost immortal. This is Umeboshi, the pickled plum that seems to never die. Legend says that ancient samurai carried them into battle, tucking a single plum into their rations to fight fatigue and thirst. Sealed in salt, the plum draws out its own moisture, curing itself from the inside until bacteria can no longer survive. The result is a fruit so sour it makes your whole face pucker, yet so preserved it can rest in a jar for 100 years without spoiling. Some Japanese households still keep plums pickled by grandmothers who are long gone, the salt crystals glittering like tiny stars. But umeboshi is more than food. It reminds people that sourness, like hardship, can be preserved into something that gives strength. Sharp, salty, and strangely alive, it teaches that even the harshest flavors have their place. But if you think a plum can last a lifetime, wait until you taste the paste that only grows richer with age. It sits quietly in wooden barrels, dark and humble, aging in silence for months or even years. This is miso, the fermented soybean paste at the very soul of the Japanese kitchen, and the longer it waits, the deeper it becomes. The process begins with soybeans, salt, and Kōji, a gentle mold that has shaped Japanese food for centuries. Packed together and left to rest, the mixture slowly transforms. Good bacteria breaking down the beans into something rich, salty, and impossibly savory. Some miso ages for a single season, pale and mild. Others darken for years, growing bold, smoky, and complex. Sealed properly, a batch of miso can last for years without spoiling, its flavor only deepening with time. A single spoonful can awaken a plain bowl of broth, turning water and vegetables into comfort itself. In some homes, a single barrel has been fed and tended for decades, one grandmother handing it to the next. The same living pace, still deepening. But if you think aged pace is impressive, wait until you meet the fish so dried and hardened it rings like wood. It looks less like food and more like a polished block of driftwood, dark and hard enough to knock against a table. But this is one of the most treasured ingredients in all of Japan. This is katsuobushi, dried bonito, sometimes called the hardest food in the world. The making of it is almost unbelievable. Fresh bonito is simmered, smoked over fire for weeks, then left to grow a special mold that draws out every last trace of moisture. Over months, the fish hardens until it can be shaved into paper-thin flakes, delicate as autumn leaves. Sealed and dry, a block of katsuobushi can last for years, its smoky essence locked inside like a secret waiting to be released. Those thin shavings are the heart of dashi, the golden broth that flavors countless Japanese dishes. When they touch hot water, they release a deep, smoky umami that seems to hum with the sea. For generations, this hardened fish has symbolized craftsmanship and endurance, the belief that patience and fire can turn something perishable into something eternal. Watch a craftsman draw the block across the blade, and the shavings curl off like pink smoke, thin enough to see through. But if the sea can be preserved into stone, wait until you smell the sticky treasure that lives and breathes inside its own jar. It smells like something long forgotten, sharp and pungent enough to make newcomers step back. But this sticky, stringy treasure is one of Japan's oldest survival foods. This is natto, fermented soybeans that are very much alive. Legend says it was discovered by accident when boiled soybeans wrapped in straw were left to sit and transformed into something entirely new. The straw carried a natural bacteria that fermented the beans, coating them in silky threads and filling them with deep, earthy flavor. Packed with living cultures, natto is bursting with nutrition, protein, and a funk so bold it divides tables to this day. For generations, farmers relied on it through the coldest months, when little else could sustain them. The secret is in the fermentation itself. Those good bacteria keep the beans nourishing and stable, a food that feeds the body when fresh meals are impossible to find. To the Japanese, natto is proof that even the strangest smells can hide the deepest strength. Slippery, savory, and undeniably alive, it teaches that survival sometimes tastes like something you must learn to love. But if you think fermented beans are bold, wait until you see the golden root that crunches like sunlight. It glows a deep, cheerful yellow, curled inside a jar like a ribbon of gold. This is takuan, pickled daikon radish, a humble food that has brightened Japanese tables for centuries. And once you taste that crunch, you'll understand why. The making of it begins with patience. Whole daikon radishes are hung in the open air and dried for weeks until they wrinkle and soften, their moisture drawn out by wind and sun. Then they're buried in rice bran and salt, left to ferment slowly until they turn golden and fragrant. Sealed away, a batch of takuan can last for months, growing tangier and crunchier with every passing week. That satisfying crunch became a quiet ritual at the Japanese table, a bright, salty bite to finish any meal. Monks especially prized it, keeping barrels of pickled radish to carry them through long seasons of simple eating. For generations, takuan has stood for thrift and comfort, the belief that nothing good should ever be wasted. It is the ordinary radish reborn as gold. But if a root can be preserved into treasure, wait until you see the humble gourd shaved into ribbons that come back to life in water. It looks like nothing more than a bundle of dried string, pale and brittle, easy to mistake for scraps. But these fragile ribbons hold a quiet magic. This is kampyo, dried gourd shavings, a food that vanishes into thin air, yet returns to life in moments. For centuries, farmers have peeled the flesh of the calabash gourd into long, thin strips, then hung them in the sun until every drop of moisture escaped. What remains is light as paper, easy to store, and able to last for many months in a simple jar. When soaked in water, the shriveled ribbons soften and swell, blooming back into something tender and edible, as if waking from a long sleep. Those revived strips are simmered in sweet soy and rolled into sushi, carrying a gentle, chewy sweetness all their own. In old Japan, drying gourds this way meant food security through the barren winter months, when fresh vegetables simply could not be found. It was survival stored in a drawer, wisdom folded into every ribbon. Rolled inside sushi, those once brittle ribbons turned tender and sweet, holding the whole piece together, the flimsiest thing on the table doing the quiet work of binding it. But if dried vegetables can outlast the seasons, wait until you see how the Japanese turned the ocean itself into food that never fades. It begins beneath the waves, long dark ribbons swaying gently with the tide. But once brought to shore and dried beneath the sun, this ocean plant becomes one of the most enduring foods in all of Japan. This is kombu, the giant sea kelp that anchors an entire cuisine. For over 1,000 years, fishermen along the cold shores of Hokkaido have harvested kombu, laying the long fronds out to dry until they turn stiff and dusted with natural white salt. Sealed away from moisture, a sheet of dried kombu can last for years, sometimes even improving as it ages. The secret lies in what it holds inside. Kombu is rich in natural glutamates, the very compounds that give food its deep, savory soul. Drop a strip into simmering water and it releases dashi, the golden broth at the heart of countless Japanese dishes. That single humble ribbon can turn plain water into something that tastes like the sea itself. To the Japanese, kombu is proof that the ocean, when respected, gives food that never truly fades. But if kelp can be preserved into gold, wait until you taste the tiny silver fish that carry the flavor of the sea in miniature. They look like a handful of silver slivers, small, dry, and easy to overlook. But these little fish pack a punch far greater than their size. These are Umeboshi, dried baby sardines, one of Japan's most humble yet powerful preserved foods. The method is beautifully simple. Fresh sardines are briefly boiled, then dried completely in the open air until every trace of moisture disappears. What remains is light, crisp, and intensely flavorful, able to last for many months in a sealed jar or tin. For generations, coastal families kept baskets of Umeboshi as insurance against lean seasons, a reliable source of nourishment when fresh catch was scarce. A small handful simmered in water creates a bold, briny broth, deeper and more rustic than kombu's gentle sweetness. Together, these dried treasures form the backbone of the Japanese kitchen, tiny, salty, and full of the ocean's memory, A single handful can turn a plain pot of water into a broth bold enough to build a meal around. But if dried fish can hold the sea, wait until you discover the invisible mold the Japanese have quietly worshipped for centuries. You can't really see it, and you certainly can't hold it in your hands. But this tiny living organism has shaped Japanese food for well over 1,000 years. This is Kōji, the noble mold that works its magic in silence. Kōji is a gentle fungus grown on steamed rice or soybeans, and it is the invisible engine behind some of Japan's greatest treasures. Miso, soy sauce, sake, and mirin all owe their existence to it. Farmers and brewers learned centuries ago that by cultivating Kōji carefully, they could unlock flavors no fresh ingredient could ever offer. It breaks down starches and proteins, transforming plain grains into something rich, sweet, and impossibly complex. When mixed with salt and rice, Kōji becomes shio Kōji, a marinade that tenderizes and deepens the flavor of anything it touches. Sealed and stored, these Kōji-based foods can last for years, aging gracefully rather than spoiling. To the Japanese, Kōji is more than a mold. It is a living partner in the kitchen, a quiet ally that turns time into flavor. It teaches that preservation is not just about stopping decay, but about inviting the right kind of transformation. But if an unseen mold can create such wonders, wait until you pour the dried treasures that come back to life the moment they touch water. It looks like nothing more than cloudy pink water sitting quietly in a bottle in the corner of the pantry. But this humble liquid is a preservation miracle born from another. This is Umezu, the plum vinegar left behind when Umeboshi are made. When plums are salted and pressed to become pickled treasures, they release a tangy, ruby-tinted brine. Rather than waste a single drop, the Japanese saved it, discovering that this salty, sour liquid was a powerful preserver in its own right. Packed with salt and the acidity of the plum, Umezu resists spoilage for years, becoming both seasoning and safeguard. A splash brightens rice, vegetables, and dressings with a sharp, fruity tang. Sour, salty, and endlessly useful. A single splash brightens rice, dressings, and vegetables with a fruity sharpness. A treasure squeezed from what most cooks would have poured down the drain. But if the byproduct of pickling can last for years, wait until you see the ancient art that turns any vegetable into something timeless. They line the shelves in jars of every color, crisp and glistening, pressed beneath heavy stones. These are tsukemono, the pickled vegetables at the very heart of the Japanese table, and behind them lies one of the oldest preservation arts on earth. For centuries, families have taken cucumbers, eggplant, cabbage, and radish, and buried them in salt, rice bran, or fermented paste. Pressed down and left to rest, the vegetables slowly release their water while salt and good bacteria take over, transforming them into something tangy, crunchy, and alive. Some are ready in a single day, others deepen for months, growing richer and more complex with time. Sealed properly, many tsukemono can last for a very long season without spoiling. That bright, salty crunch became more than food. It was survival through the barren winters, a way to keep vegetables edible when the fields lay frozen and bare. Every household kept its own pickling barrel, its flavor a secret passed down through generations. To the Japanese, tsukemono is proof that salt and patience can defeat even the harshest season. But if vegetables can be preserved into treasure, wait until you meet the mushroom that seems to die, only to awaken again. They look like shriveled little umbrellas, dry and cracked, almost lifeless to the touch. But pour hot water over them, and these mushrooms awaken like magic, releasing an aroma so rich it can fill an entire kitchen. These are dried shiitake, one of Japan's most treasured preserved foods. For centuries, mushrooms have been sun-dried not just to preserve them, but to make them stronger. Drying draws out moisture while concentrating their natural glutamates, the same savory compounds that give meat its depth. What was once mild and soft becomes intense, chewy, and packed with a smoky, earthy flavor far greater than when fresh. Stored away in a jar, dried shiitake can last for years, wait impatiently to be revived. In the days before refrigeration, drying was survival. Farmers gathered mushrooms in autumn, strung them up, and hung them beneath the eaves to dry in the mountain air. By winter, they had food that could last for years, light to carry and full of nourishment. Today, dried shiitake still anchor Japanese soups, simmered dishes, and broths, their flavor deeper than any fresh mushroom could offer. To the Japanese, they are proof that sometimes you must lose moisture to gain soul. When you open that jar, you're not just smelling mushrooms, you're smelling patience itself. But if a dried mushroom can be reborn in water, wait until you watch the sea plants bloom back to life in seconds. It looks like brittle threads of frosted glass, weightless and pale, ready to crumble at the slightest touch. But drop these fragile sticks into water and they bloom into something soft and alive. This is Kanten, the Japanese jelly drawn from the sea that can last almost forever. Kanten begins with seaweed, boiled down and then frozen and dried in the cold mountain air until only a light, papery skeleton remains. This ancient process, perfected centuries ago, leaves behind sticks so dry they seem lifeless. Yet, stored in a simple box, Kanten can last for years without ever spoiling. When simmered in liquid, it dissolves and then sets into a cool, clear jelly, firmer and purer than anything made from animal gelatin. For generations, it became the base of delicate desserts and quiet summer treats. Light, clear, and endlessly patient, it waits in the dark until hot water calls it back. Dissolving, then setting into a jelly so clean and cool it seems to hold light inside it. But if the sea can be dried into glass, wait until you drop the green ribbons that swell to life the moment they touch warm broth. They look like dark, crinkled flakes, dry and almost lifeless in the bag. But add them to warm water, and within seconds they unfurl into soft green ribbons, silky and vibrant as if freshly pulled from the tide. This is dried wakame, one of Japan's most beloved sea vegetables. For centuries, coastal families have harvested wakame and dried it under the sun and wind until it shrank into small, dark curls. In this shriveled state, it weighs almost nothing and can be stored for a very long time, a perfect food for lean seasons and long journeys. The drying locks in its minerals and ocean flavor, sealing the sea inside each fragile piece. When rehydrated, it returns instantly, tender and glossy, ready to enrich any bowl. A pinch of wakame transforms a plain miso soup into something nourishing and green, tasting of salt and waves. Beyond flavor, it carries the memory of the coast, a link between the mountains and the sea. Stir a pinch into miso soup and it swells in seconds. Dark flakes unfurling into glossy green ribbons, tasting of salt and open water. But if sea plants can be reborn in an instant, wait until you taste the humble root that grows sweeter the longer it dries. They look like tangled pale strands, dry and unremarkable, easy to mistake for straw. But these thin strips hold a hidden sweetness that only time can create. This is Umeboshi daikon, dried radish shreds, a quiet treasure of the Japanese pantry. The process is simple and old. Fresh daikon radish is cut into fine strips and laid out in the winter sun, where the cold air slowly draws away its moisture. As it dries, something remarkable happens. The radish, once sharp and watery, grows mellow and sweet, its sugars concentrating with every passing day. Light and shelf-stable, Umeboshi daikon can last for many months in a sealed jar, ready whenever it is needed. When soaked, the strips soften and swell, releasing a gentle sweetness far richer than fresh radish could ever offer. Simmered with soy and other treasures of the pantry, they become a comforting, home-cooked dish beloved across Japan. For generations, farmers relied on it to stretch the harvest through the barren months. To the Japanese, Umeboshi daikon is proof that patience does not just preserve, it transforms, turning something plain into something sweet. But if a dried root can hold such sweetness, wait until you meet the tiny leaves the Japanese have called the secret to a long and clear life. They look like humble dried leaves, curled and green, tucked away in a simple tin. But for over 1,000 years, the Japanese have called them the secret to a long and clear life. This is green tea, dried and stored, a quiet treasure of health and calm. Legend says that monks first brought tea to Japan, brewing the leaves to stay awake and focus through long hours of meditation. They believed it sharpened the mind, steadied the spirit, and nourished the body from within. To preserve it, farmers steamed and dried the fresh leaves until every trace of moisture vanished, locking in their color and their power. Sealed away from air and light, dried tea can last for a very long time, its delicate flavor waiting patiently to awaken. When ground into fine powder, it becomes matcha, the vivid green tea whisked into a frothy bowl during sacred ceremonies. A single sip carries centuries of ritual, a taste of stillness in a restless world. To the Japanese, tea is more than a drink. It's medicine, meditation, and memory folded into a single leaf. Whisked into bright green matcha, one quiet sip still carries the hush of a centuries-old ceremony. But if dried leaves can hold such calm, wait until you hold the little red beans said to carry good fortune itself. They look like tiny polished stones, deep red and hard as pebbles, rattling in the jar. But these small beans have nourished and blessed Japanese families for centuries. These are azuki, the little red beans woven into both survival and celebration. Dried azuki beans are almost indestructible. Once harvested and dried in the sun, they harden into gems that can be stored for years without spoiling, ready whenever they are needed. For generations, farmers kept sacks of them as a reliable source of protein and comfort through the leanest seasons. But azuki are more than survival food. Their deep red color has long been seen as a symbol of luck and protection, and families cook them on festival days to invite good fortune. Simmered slowly with sugar, they become sweet red bean paste, the beloved filling of countless Japanese sweets. Soaked and boiled with rice, they turn a plain meal into a dish of celebration. To the Japanese, azuki beans are proof that nourishment and joy can live inside the same humble seed. But if red beans can carry luck, wait until you discover the tiny golden seeds the Japanese have treasured as a source of pure strength. They look like nothing more than a scatter of tiny specks, pale gold or black, so small they slip between your fingers. But these little seeds are packed with a power far greater than their size. These are sesame seeds, or goma, one of the oldest treasures of the Japanese kitchen. For centuries, sesame has been prized not just for flavor, but for the rich oils sealed inside each tiny grain. Once dried, the seeds become remarkably stable, able to last for a very long time in a sealed jar without losing their strength. This natural oil is both their gift and their armor, protecting them from spoilage while nourishing whoever eats them. As toasted gently over heat, they release a deep, nutty aroma that fills the entire kitchen. A sprinkle of sesame transforms plain rice or vegetables into something rich and fragrant, while ground goma becomes creamy dressings and sauces. In traditional thinking, these seeds were believed to bring energy and long life, a small food with a mighty spirit. Toasted for a few seconds, these specks fill the whole kitchen with a deep, nutty aroma. And ground into paste, they turn plain vegetables into something rich enough to remember. But if tiny seeds can hold such strength, wait until you bite into the chewy treasures the Japanese have shared for generations at the turning of every year. It looks like a plain white cake, soft and unassuming, yet older than many of Japan's temples. But when dried and stored, this humble food becomes a lifeline that can last for months. This is mochi, pounded rice transformed into something almost eternal. For centuries, families have steamed sticky rice and pounded it by hand until it became a smooth, stretchy dough. Fresh mochi is soft and fleeting, but the Japanese learned long ago to slice it thin and dry it in the winter air. In this hardened form, called kakemochi, it turns brittle and stone-like, able to rest in a jar for many months without spoiling. When the moment comes, a piece is grilled or fried and it puffs back to life, crisp on the outside and warm within. Mochi has always carried deep meaning. At the turning of every year, families pound it together and stack it for good fortune, a ritual passed down through countless generations. The scent of grilling mochi brings back memories of New Year mornings, a family gathered close against the cold. To the Japanese, mochi is more than food. It is celebration preserve, a taste of home that survives the longest winters. But if pounded rice can be stored for months, wait until you hear the crackling, golden discs that fill Japanese festivals with joy. They come in stacks of golden discs, crisp and glossy, often wrapped in a band of dark seaweed. Snap one in half and it shatters with a satisfying crack. These are senbei, the beloved rice crackers that have delighted Japan for centuries. The making of senbei is an old and patient craft. Rice is pounded, shaped into thin rounds, and dried until firm, then grilled or baked over heat until golden and crisp. Brushed with soy sauce, they caramelize into a savory glaze that fills the air with a toasty aroma. Because every trace of moisture is driven out, senbei can last for a very long time in a sealed tin, staying crunchy long after they are made. For generations, these crackers have been more than a snack. During festivals and special visits, families gift them as a gesture of warmth and good fortune, wrapped like small treasures. Merchants once carried them on long journeys, trusting their crunch to survive the road. The taste is simple yet unforgettable, salty, toasty, and deeply satisfying. A bite that connects the present to centuries of tradition. Even today, old shops still grill senbei by hand over open flame, the meat of the rice crackling in the heat. In old shops, you can still watch them grilled by hand over open flame, brushed with soy until they hiss and caramelize. Snap one in half. That clean, sharp crack is the sound of a snack that has survived on Japanese shelves for centuries. The ordinary made festive, the fleeting made lasting. But if dried rice can bring such happiness, wait until you meet the final treasures of this journey. The liquid gold the Japanese have aged in barrels for over 1,000 years. It gleams like dark amber, rich and glossy, poured slowly from a bottle that has waited years to be opened. But this is far more than a simple seasoning. This is soy sauce, the liquid soul of Japanese cooking, aged and deepened by time itself. Born over 1,000 years ago, soy sauce begins with the humblest of ingredients: soybeans, wheat, salt, and water. Mixed with Kōji, that noble mold, the blend is left to ferment and age in great wooden barrels for months or even years. Slowly, patiently, it transforms into a liquid of astonishing depth, salty and sweet and savory all at once. The salt and fermentation guard it against decay, allowing a bottle to last for a very long time, its flavor only growing more complex with age. A single splash awakens fish, rice, and vegetables, unlocking their hidden essence with one dark pour. To the Japanese, soy sauce is proof that time and salt can create what no factory ever could. But the final treasure of this journey is even more remarkable, for it is aged not just for flavor, but for celebration itself. It shimmers like pale gold in a cup, warm and fragrant, carrying an aroma that has filled Japanese homes for centuries. This is sake, and its sweeter cousin Mirin, the aged rice wines that both flavor food and defy the passing of time. Born from rice, water, and Kōji, they are fermented and aged with the same patience that shapes every great Japanese treasure. Sake begins when polished rice is fermented slowly in cool cellars, its sugars transforming into something clear and complex. Mirin, thick and golden, is aged until it grows rich with a gentle sweetness. Both were once precious offerings, poured at shrines and shared at festivals to mark the turning of the seasons. In the kitchen, a splash of either awakens meat and fish, softening, sweetening, and deepening every dish it touches. Sealed and aged, these rice wines endure for years, their character only maturing with time. Beyond the kitchen, they carry deep meaning, symbols of celebration, purity, and gratitude. To the Japanese, sake and mirin are the final reminder that preservation was never only about survival. It was about honoring the slow art of transformation, the quiet mastery that turns rice and water into liquid gold. And as this journey ends, one truth remains. In Japan, time was never the enemy. It was always an ingredient. From sour red plums to shimmering rice wine, every preserved food in this land tells a story of patience, resilience, and quiet wisdom. These aren't just meals, they are time capsules. Proof that survival itself can be an art form, carried forward through countless generations. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.